Okay, I've been trying to research the Melissa Alexander case because I thought I'd do a video on some examples of mainstream media misandry and lies and disinformation. Okay, and the problem is search engines block out most of the good results, or they deprioritize them, like push them down the rankings. And most of the results I get are from the mainstream media. And the first truthful result I get is actually from Reddit, believe it or not, on the search index, which is absolutely shocking to me. And it was quite far down as well. Okay, I do know there's a smaller media organisations who have done debunk articles on the Melissa Alexander case. So Melissa Alexander was an abusive woman who was a domestic abuser who was ordered by the court to stay away from her husband and kids, and fired a gun at his head and missed. Okay, so before I read the true information, I'll read some old articles that are just barefaced lies. Now, number one is The Guardian. Florida stand your ground law at the centre of Melissa Alexander retrial. Appeals court grant a new trial for woman sentenced to 20 years for firing a gun in the air during a domestic dispute. This is technically it's correct. She did fire a gun into the air in the same way that if I throw a knife at someone's head and it misses by an inch and doesn't hit them, I threw a knife in the air. She fired the gun at her husband's head, period. Okay. A Florida woman sentenced to 20 years in prison after she fired a warning shot. It was not a warning shot. It was not a warning shot because she was not under attack. During a dispute with her husband has been granted a retrial. You see, it's weird. It's see how what implying they try not to lie too overtly, more covertly, but they're implying stuff. But it's still a lie. It's a lie by omission, which is the classic mainstream media lying tactic. Melissa Alexander, 32, said he fired into the ceiling. No, she didn't. She fired at his head because she was afraid of her husband, or she claimed she was afraid. She invoked Florida's controversial stand your ground law, but was found guilty of aggravated assault. The judge at the trial said that the conviction carried a mandatory 20-year sentence under state law. Yeah, because trying to fire a gun at someone is pretty serious shit. On Thursday, and actually we might need mandatory minimum sentencing because otherwise women don't get a proper criminal sentence, unfortunately. Like if you give judges discretion, they'll just let women off every single time. On Thursday, an appeals court ruled that Alexander would get a new trial because female privilege. Feminist groups pressured the legal system. However, Judge James H. Daniel said that the burden has been improperly placed and Alexander to prove the firing was in self-defense. So a judge thinks there's been an improper burden that's been placed on her to prove it was self-defense, even though she's a history of domestic abuse, right? Okay, of beating her ex-spouse, but the legal system placed undue burden for her to prove her case. That's staggering. The defendant's burden is only to raise reasonable doubt concerning self-defense, Daniel said, according to MSNBC. The defendant does not have a burden to prove the victim guilty of the aggression defended against beyond a reasonable doubt. That means anyone can aggress against someone and claim they feared for their lives and it was self-defense. Jesus Christ. A separate hearing will decide whether Alexander can be released on bail pending the retrial. I think she's actually back with her kids now, this fucking lunatic. A scumbag who fired a gun in the same room as her kids. That's vermin lower than the lowest animal, as far as I'm concerned. Despite ordering a retrial, Daniel said that the judge in Alexander's first hearing was right to block her from using the stand your ground law to defend her actions. We reject. They'll just bring up, from what I remember, the details of this. They'll bring up the stand your ground in a completely irrelevant manner. We reject the contention that the trials court erred in declining to grant immunity from prosecution under Florida stand your ground law because she wasn't under threat. Daniel said, but we remand for a new trial because the jury's instructions of self-defense were erroneous. It took 12 minutes for the jury to find Alexander guilty in May 2012. That's quick. She was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment. That should have been life because she fired a gun in the room with her same kids. She's a psychopath. Under Florida's 10-20 life law, MSNBC reported, which carries a series of mandatory minimum sentences related to gun crimes. You see, these minimum sentences were there to get men. But when they get a woman, people get outraged. Alexander argued that she had acted in self-defense after her husband Rico Gray attacked her at the home in August 2010. Gray grabbed her by the neck, Alexander said, after finding texts from her ex-husband on her phone. She said she ran into the garage, returned with a gun. So she even her own claim called bullshit and self-defense, right? And fired the gun into the air as a warning shot. So she left. She wasn't being followed. She returned and she fired off a warning shot. Even her own bullshit story's false, right? The case provoked outcry at the apparent double standards between Alexander's case and that of George Zimmerman. That's where they kept on erroneously bringing up the standard ground control. This has nothing to do with George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman was legitimate self-defense. He was getting his head pounded on the concrete. This was an abusive abuser who used to abuse a spouse or husband, and she fired a gun at him. After she left the room and she came back and fired a gun at him. Who killed Trayvon Martin, initially avoided arrest after invoking Florida's stand your ground law. During a trial, lawmakers in Florida argued that controversial law was entirely applicable in Alexander's situation. The stand your ground law was legislated and implemented to protect people like Mrs. Alexander, says State Senator Gary Siplu. So senators opened his fucking gob on this issue, and he should keep his gob shut on a legal case. You should have shut your mouth, idiot. She did not have a history of criminal or violent behaviour. That's a barefaced lie. She has a history of domestic abuse. Instead, she has a history of being physically and emotionally abused. That's a barefaced lie. So a state senator just barefaced lied about this. Right? Okay? CNN. Florida woman sentenced to 20 years in controversial warning shot case. So this is from 2012. This is like pretty old stuff. But this is a show. This is the same sort of disinformation that they said about the Amber Heard case. There's similar tactics, lies by omission. Right? A judge issues a 20-year sentence to a woman who fired... Story highlights. A judge issues a 20-year sentence to a woman who fired a warning shot inside her house. That's a lie. Judge James Daniel says that he had no choice in the sentence. Yeah, that white knight would have given her a lesser sentence if he could. Melissa Alexander says she fired warning shot to fend off her abusive husband. Now, the Guardian article didn't actually provide the truth. The truth existed. It wasn't that they didn't know. They just didn't provide it. So it's lies by omission. A congresswoman confronts prosecutor Angela Clory after the sentencing. A congresswoman. So this shows you that women don't give a fuck about children. And society didn't give a fuck about children. A piece of trash who fired a gun in the same room as her own children and fired at the head of their father in front of them. A congresswoman is going to bat for her. Right? CNN. Saying she had no discretion under state law, a judge sentenced a Jacksonville, Florida woman to 20 years in prison on Friday for firing a warning shot in an effort to scare off her abusive husband. That's not in quotes. So she claimed she was an abusive husband, and the media treats her claims like fact, even though he was not an abusive husband. He was an abused black man. So all these civil rights groups, because there were civil rights groups standing up for her and trying to bring up race, right? They threw the black man under the bus, right, to stick up for an abusive black woman who's victimizing a black man. So all these civil rights groups hate black men. So they're not really civil rights groups. They're feminist, racist groups. In a lot of ways, these civil rights groups are just as racist against black men as the KKK, throwing black men under the bus. So black men under the threat of death, murder and abuse, they'll side with an abusive black woman every single time. Every single time. Melissa Alexander unsuccessfully tried to use Florida's conventional stand your ground law. I know this is sort of boring and I'm reading the same sort of stories twice, but I just want to show there's countless examples out there to derail all the prosecution. But a jury in March convicted her of aggravated assault in just 12 minutes of deliberation. Yeah, because she's a thug. The case, which was prosecuted by the state attorney handling the Trayvon Martin case, nothing to do with anything, they're just bringing it up to play the race card, has gained the attention of civil rights leaders who say African American women was prosecuted because of a race. That's complete fucking nonsense. Complete fucking nonsense. What about the black man? What about the black man who was shot at? After the sentencing, Representative Cory Blount confronted State Attorney Angela Clory in the hallway, accusing her of being overzealous, according to a video from CNN affiliate WJXT. So he went for the minimum sentence, and this senator, a white knight, got in her face over it when he should have been staying out of it. Fuck you. Fuck you. Like, these senators won't do shit for a man in this situation. This sentimentality towards women is disgusting. It's actually based on hatred of men. There's no justification for 20 years. Yeah, you're right. It should have been 50. Anyone who fires a gun in the same room as their kids is vermin that should be locked up for life. I'm sorry. I don't care. Right? You've got to be absolute fucking scum to do that. Absolute fucking scum to what, like she tried to headshot the father of her kids in front of her kid. So she could hit the kids by accident, or she could have blown his head off in front of the kids and traumatized them for life. Yeah. And who's to say this vicious bitch wouldn't have shot her kids, like the silence witnesses afterwards? Oh yeah, she might think, oh, my kids would have snitched on me. Jesus Christ. There's no justification for 20 years, Brown told Clory during an exchange, freakily interrupted by onlookers. All the community was asking for was mercy and justice, she said. Letting a woman off is mercy and justice. Clory, women always back up violent women, even ones who are a danger to kids. Clory said she had offered Alexandra a plea bargain that would have resulted in a 3-year prison sentence. She was offered a plea bargain, but this arrogant bitch turned it down. So she was offered a plea bargain. The legal system wanted to give an evil bitch of a woman who tried to who shot a gun in the same room as a kid, tried to murder the father of the father of kids in front of a kid, blow his fucking brains out in front of her kids, and the fucking legal system in America gave her a plea deal for 3 years. Oh my God. So if you run someone over by accident, right, even if you're being reckless and you're drunk, but it's an accident, there's no intent to kill, right, you get a far longer sentence than this. Oh my God. Fuck the American legal system. But Alexander chose to take the case to a jury trial. Yeah, she wasn't expecting accountability, where a conviction would carry a management sentence under a Florida law known as 10-20 life. Law mandates increased penalties for some felonies, including aggravated assault in which a gun is carried or used. They might as well just change the legal system and say women get off. Clory said that should be the legal code, at least to be honest. Clory said the case deserved to be prosecuted because Alexander fired in the direction of a room where 2 children were standing. Of course. Alexander said she was attempting to flee her husband, Rico Gray, on August the 1st, 2010, when she picked up a handgun and fired a shot into the wall. So much details omitted on purpose. This is done deliberately. This is a deliberate lie by omission to make the woman look better. So this is disinformation, misinformation, right? This is lies by the media. This is actually criminal, in my opinion. Okay? So feminism is a war movement, and feminism is at war with the entire male sex. And one of the things you do when you're at war is you pump out information to confuse your enemy, and they consider men their enemy, right? She said her husband had read cell phone text messages that she had written to her ex-husband, got angry and tried to strangle her. That's just a barefaced lie. From what I remember, she actually found out that he was sleeping with another woman, right? And she got angry, so she's projecting her lie onto him. She said she escaped and ran to the garage, intending to drive away, but she said she'd got her keys, so she picked up a gun and went back into the house. She said her husband threatened to kill her, so she fired 1 shot. That's a lie. I believe when he threatened to kill me, that's what he was absolutely going to do. That's a lie. She was ordered to stay away from him because she was an abuser, and she went back to him. So that's a lie. She felt completely safe around him. She said that's what he intended to do. Had I not discharged my weapon at that point, I would not be here. That's a lie. I'm repeating myself a lot, but I just want to emphasise that that's a lie. Alexander's attorney tried to use a state law that allows people to use potentially deadly force anywhere they feel reasonably threatened with serious harm or death. That's reasonably threatened. That's not barefaced lie made up fantasy, right? But a privileged judge in the case rejected the request, saying Alexander's decision to go back into the house was not consistent with someone in fear of her safety. Absolutely correct, according to the Florida Times-Union newspaper. And the fact that she's a domestic abuser of her victim, is someone who's not in fear of her safety, right? This guy's a lot bigger than her. He could snap her neck and her head off if he wanted to, but she was beating him all the time. So that's someone who's completely fearless, right? Okay, that's someone who's completely fearless, in the same way as the midship mafia don slaps around a 280-pound soldier of his, right, in front of everyone, and beats him up, and he doesn't fight back because he's got more social power. It's the same dynamic. Daniel handed down the sentence since on Friday after an emotional sentence hearing in which Alexander's parents, 11-year-old daughter and pastor, spoke on her behalf. So that's emotionally manipulative, basically. And it's amazing when a woman does this. The entire community tries to get her off, even though she's a no-good, violent, ratchet bitch. Several people had to be escorted from the courtroom after breaking out, singing and chanting about a perceived lack of justice in the case. So they act up when a woman gets justice. But Daniel made a point to say that he had no choice under state law. He should have given them more. Under the state's 1020 life law, conviction for aggravated assault where a firearm has been discharged carries a minimum and maximum sentence of 20 years without regarding to any extenuating or mitigating circumstances to any that may be present, such as those in this case. Daniel said that there's no mitigating circumstances. There's aggravating circumstances. She fired a gun in the same room as her kids, and she tried to headshot the father of her kids. She tried to murder him in cold blood because she was angry. Brown, the Jacksonville congresswoman, told reporters after sentencing that the case was a product of institutional racism. No, your reaction is a product of institutional racism. You do not give a fuck about a black male who was being victimized, and you're labeling him as an abuser to get this bitch off. She was overcharged by the prosecutor, period, Brown said. She should have never been charged. Yeah, because from a female supremacist point of view, no female should be charged, right? And when a female commits a crime against a man, you'll always label the man as an abuser to try and justify her abuse. That's how you feminists always work. Brown has been more complimentary about Clorry's work in the Trayvon Martin case, where her office filed secondary murder charges against neighborhood watch volunteer George Zimmerman on the February 26th death of an unarmed African American teenager. The case provoked nationwide protests demanding Zimmerman's arrest after initial police investigation released him under the stand your ground law. Okay. So this is the Reddit post. I've actually done some research into this. This is 10 years ago, when I've got a feeling if this case happened today, you wouldn't be getting this information on Reddit now. Okay? I've actually done some research in this case, and you can actually find this information for yourself. It is actually out there on credible journalist sites. But this was the first result that I found on the internet. That this was the least buried one, but it was still buried. I had to go down a couple of pages. I've actually done some research in this case already. Let me fill in some of the holes and correct the misinformation here, i.e. lies. She wasn't in trouble for simply firing a warning shot. She's in trouble because she used deadly force when it wasn't justified according to the law. 2, she did not fire the weapon into the kitchen ceiling. Yeah, because that was a common lie told by the mainstream media. She was standing in the living room with her husband, and he was next to his 2 kids. You see how the article lied, saying they were in another room? No, he was next to his 2 kids in the same room. She pointed a gun at his head and fired. The bullet barely missed his head, travelled through the wall, and then into the ceiling of the kitchen. Her husband's testimony, the man she fired a gun at was basically discounted because, against the orders of the court, they had met up after she was arrested and discussed what he was going to say in her defence. He was trying to get her off because of Stockholm Syndrome. 4, if you still think her husband is trustworthy, he told the police after the shooting that she had threatened to shoot him in the past, and his children told the prosecutor that she was screaming at them during the incident. He then testified that they were all lies. So he told the truth out of panic and fear, and then he recanted his testimony to try and protect her. 5, after being arrested for shooting, she drove to his house again. She was not supposed to have any contact with him and assaulted him, and she was arrested again. Wow, the media didn't tell you that, does it? 6, her defence about using stand your ground doesn't work when she fired the gun. He was not doing anything towards her. She had left the home, got the gun, and came back. And he was in the process of leaving when she pointed the gun at him. Okay, so this is the memory hole. I'm not going to use the term Orwellian. This is the feminist memory hole, right? Everyone's forgotten about this case, or when they do remember it, they remember the feminist lies about it. And this woman eventually got released, right? And I think she's back with her kids. And this is a woman who's a danger to her kids, but no one gives a fuck about the children. They don't give a fuck about the men, and they don't give a fuck about the children. And they don't give a fuck about black men either. This black man who's been victimised by her, right? So this woman's a legitimate danger to her kids. She's a bad example to her kids. She should not be raising her kids, period. And society colluded and worked together to get this woman off and escape justice. Okay? And the most important aspect of justice is actually not punishment, it's protection. It's to protect the vulnerable in society. But when it comes to women, society fails to fulfill its duty and lets them abuse men and lets them abuse children. Okay? And this memory hole is very serious, and these same feminist gatekeepers are still in positions of power of the mainstream media. And there's countless examples of feminists telling these lies in mainstream media articles over and over and over again. Okay? And there's a new case of a girl who, when she was 17, she shot a man and killed him when he was asleep. Okay? And she claimed she was sex trafficked by him, and she was raped and she was abused by him. And I don't believe her. Okay? And I'm going to do some more research into this case and talk about it because it's recent. And people in Reddit communities are praising this woman. There was a fundraiser because she was given a 5-year suspended sentence, and everyone's complaining about this sentence, saying it's an outrage that she got this sentence at all. Not that it was too lenient; it was an outrage she got it at all, and she got a $100,000 fine, and the community fundraised her and raised double the amount of her fine. Okay, and I tried debating this, objecting to this, and I was called an incel misogynist. She shot this guy in the back of the head. So, and this is a far more recent case, and I'll do another video on this. This shows you how perverted and warped our society is, and this shows you how much we need a men's rights movement, because men are subhuman niggers in the eyes of society. We're fair game for murder and killing, right? And any woman can kill us and claim abuse, and we're particularly vulnerable as men in relationships with women. They can just shoot us in the back of the head, or strangle us, or beat us to death with a hammer and get off. There's a woman who beat her husband to death with a hammer in the UK and got off, and they tried to use dubious mental health arguments, right, and claim that he was abusive to her with zero evidence, right? So, fucking hell, I think I did a video about that one as well. So I'm in genuine shock about what's been happening recently, because things are getting worse and worse. Over and out.